You ready? Speaking first will be the president of the New York State Bar Association, Richard Lewis.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, thank you all for being here. This is really a pretty momentous day because we've got a report here that I think is going to give the earliest definition of the post-decision, post-affirmative action decision landscape. And our goal here is to attempt to tell people what the new landscape is, how we're going to navigate that landscape, and how we think things are going to progress from here. As you know, the decision concerns education, but we don't think it's going to stop there. We think it's going to continue to move on. Now, we had 3 chairs and numerous chairs of subcommittees, some of whom are here today. And I want to talk to you very briefly about our chairs, and I don't think I have to speak very lengthily because, candidly, you all know who Jeh Johnson is. Obviously, the former Secretary of Homeland Security, amongst other things. He is considered to be one of the finest lawyers in the country. He is considered to be an activist. Huh. He is considered to be someone who has gravitas, and he does. He is a person who, when I called before this decision came out and said, we have concerns about what's going to transpire here. We have to look at what the new situation is going to be for our clients, our schools, our businesses, our court system, et cetera. And his response was, having never spoken to me before, I'm all in. But not only that, he then contacted his partner of some 40 years and the chairman of this firm, Brad Karp, and Brad Karp said, not only am I all in, but our law firm, Paul Weiss, is all in, and we want this done in 30 days. And Cheryl Chambers is sitting here, and she could tell you that 30 days is a pretty stiff schedule. And thank you for giving up your August. And it was done. And we have a report that you are seeing today. There will still be a couple more modifications based on a conversation we had with our executive committee. The third chair of this. Well, let me just finish up firstly with a little bit about Brad Karp. Brad is not only the chairman of Paul Weiss, but he is an activist. He is a person who is sitting on the boards of God knows how many corporations and how many different groups that are pledged to increasing inclusion and diversity. He has received awards from everybody, including the Anti-Defamation League. He is, and he knows everybody. And when Jeh and Brad speak, a lot of people listen, and a lot of people jump on board. And we had well over 50 lawyers, I believe, who participated in this report. And when I say 50 lawyers, I mean the chairs of all of the major law firms, the counsel for universities and law schools, the counsel for our SUNY system, our SUNY university system, and many others. I see that Vince Chang is here, and Vince is very active with regard to this. I see Judge Mendelson and Judge Chambers here, and they co-chaired the judicial portion of this report. So it was an incredible effort, and we owe a huge thank you to both Secretary Johnson and Chairman Karp. And then to talk about another person who chaired this, who needs no no explanation with regard to her credentials is former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. And as we all know, Attorney General Lynch has been involved in numerous civil rights issues. She's been involved in numerous issues involving diversity and inclusion, and she certainly has been fighting for justice for a long time and has done so effectively. So we have a report, and this report's purpose, as I indicated before, is not to be critical of the Supreme Court, not to criticize our institutions. It is very specific. There are a lot of racial issues out there. This is concerned with one, and that's what do we do now that affirmative action after 40 years is gone? And that's what we want to talk about, and that's what Secretary Jeh Johnson will discuss. So I turn this over to Secretary Johnson. I don't think he'll be offended if you applaud.
President Lewis, thank you very much. As Dick pointed out in June, before the Supreme Court decision, he reached out to me to call upon me, Brad, and Loretta to co-chair a task force to offer recommendations to chart the way forward after the Supreme Court decides the affirmative action case, which they did on June 29th. I want to compliment Dick on his foresight and his leadership in doing so. We did assemble a really extraordinary, impressive group of lawyers, including people like Mike Delicat, who's sitting back there, who's an employment law expert, to be part of this task force on very short notice. We put out a call. The response was swift and vast by people who really do care about this issue of diversity in business, diversity in the judiciary, diversity in law firms, and diversity in higher education. June 29th, the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional the admissions practices at Harvard and UNC. Our task, in light of that decision, was where do we go from here, essentially? On a very personal level, diversity in higher education has meant a lot to me. In 1978, when the Supreme Court decided the Bakke decision, I was a rising senior at Morehouse College, and I was in the midst of applying to law schools to become a lawyer. I was admitted to Columbia Law School. I'll never know whether I was admitted as the result of affirmative action, but I was certainly admitted in the midst of affirmative action. And therefore, it may be the case that were it not for the Bakke decision, I would not have been admitted to Columbia Law School. I would not be a partner in this law firm today. I would not be a trustee of Columbia University today. Diversity in higher education, in the judgment of many, including myself, has led to a more perfect union. Diversity in higher education feeds diversity in the professions, in the legal profession, in the medical profession, in business, in journalism. In so many contexts, diversity in higher education has led to a more diverse society in the uppermost echelons of our society. Since Bakke, black graduates of the nation's premier law schools have gone on to become judges, a Supreme Court justice, a vice president, a president, numerous members of Congress, numerous cabinet officials, just since the Bakke decision. The report we're issuing today, which has been approved by the Executive Committee of the Bar Association a few minutes ago, is an effort to chart the way forward. We encourage the use of race-neutral criteria for achieving diversity in higher education, That's Brad Karp, chairman of Paul Weiss, trying to sneak in.
Apparently the hunchback of Paul Weiss. Duck walking.
We recommend the continuation of race-neutral criteria in higher education to achieve diverse student bodies. We recommend that universities take a strong look at admissions policies and practices that may serve as barriers to equal opportunity in admissions. We encourage that colleges and universities very clearly set forth standards and goals, which was something, the lack of which the Supreme Court criticized when it came to the Harvard and UNC policies. We divided ourselves into several working groups because there were so many of us who were interested in this issue. We divided ourselves in generating this report into a working group that focused on higher education, law school deans, legal advisors to universities, and there's a separate section in the report about higher ed. There's a separate section in the report on the private sector, though the Supreme Court decision did not explicitly opine on diversity in the private sector. There's a working group section on the private sector. There's a working group section on law firms and on the judiciary. As I noted 3 years ago in the report I wrote for the Chief Judge of New York State, our judiciary here in New York State is more diverse, looks more like New York State, but there's more to be done. In that section of the report, which I know Judge Mendelson and Judge Chambers had a lot to do with, we continue to advocate for anti-bias training, bias awareness, remaining in touch with the community. It is essential that we have a justice system that looks like this state in order for it to be sustainable and credible. Our recommendations are summarized in the appendix of the report. There are a number of them, and we did this in just 30 days. The question of affirmative action, you know, we lawyers say I don't need more time. I just need a deadline. So we met the deadline. The issue of diversity in the private sector, in higher ed, will be litigated years forward. This is a start. This report is a start. Hopefully it charts a course for the way we should look at diversity in the workplace, in our schools, post the Supreme Court decision. I'll stop talking. Brad, is there anything you'd like to offer? Brad Karp, by the way, is a leader among leaders of law firms here in this city and in the legal profession. When I asked Brad to join us, I knew that he would be able to convene a remarkable group of law firm chairs, legal experts, general counsels of our nation's largest businesses. I see Loretta Lynch has just walked in, the former Attorney General. And so we put together a remarkable group in a very, very short period of time. Brad, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Jay. And I want to thank Dick Lewis for catalyzing this critically important effort. And anytime you have the opportunity to partner with Jay Johnson and Loretta Lynch, you're pretty well assured of having a phenomenal output. And we're very, very proud of what we've accomplished with this report. All of us knew when the Supreme Court took on the Harvard and UNC cases that an adverse outcome was highly likely, and that there would be an urgent and a pressing need across both the legal industry and the business world and universities for guidance to ensure that lawful diversity efforts and initiatives could continue. For all of us at Paul Weiss and all of us more broadly in the legal profession, diversity is a business imperative. We do our best work in diverse environments. We provide our best advice and our best guidance to clients in diverse environments. Paul Weiss, from its very founding, has believed in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Going back, more than 75 years, we worked with Thurgood Marshall in Brown versus Board of Education to help outlaw segregation in our nation's public schools. We've had numerous opportunities in the ensuing generations to stand for diversity, and each and every time we have stood on the side of diversity. We're very proud of this report. We're very appreciative of the phenomenal support we got from the legal community, from the business community, and from the educational community. We were able to assemble a team of law firm chairs, of leading general counsel of major corporations, and deans of major law schools to help in this effort. As Jay indicated, we were able to finish our work quickly, and finishing our work quickly will enable those who need to work to continue to foster diversity to have guardrails, to have guidance, to have concrete principles to allow them to ensure that diversity is preserved and safeguarded going forward. I'm very grateful to have been part of this effort, and I'm very grateful to everyone who participated to make the three of us and Dick look good. Thank you very, very much.
Attorney General, would you? I want to say one thing before the Attorney General speaks. Just don't sit. Wait, we want to. I think it was Reggie Jackson who said at one time that he was the straw that stirred the drink. Am I right? It was Reggie?
Yes.
So we have.
Munson was not happy with that quote.
And you must be happy with the Giants on Sunday. But in this situation, we have Secretary Johnson and Chairman Karp and Attorney General Lynch. So it's not just a straw stirring the drink. We have a Cuisinart here. And I'm happy to introduce Attorney General Lynch.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I will not take up more time because you've heard from my esteemed colleagues. We're all here to present what has been a phenomenal team effort. And a team effort because more than just the few of us up here recognize the importance of this issue. We are sitting here now at an inflection point, and many people refer to those at different points in time. I think the last time we used that word so much was back in 2020, when the true impact of the racial disparities in this country and the deep fissures that they have let exist in our society came together in the tragic and horrific death of George Floyd. Of course, not the only example of the difficult history that we all confront, and frankly, that we all bear. And so we saw at that time great progress. And the best part about that time, what came from that terrible tragedy, however, was how we all came together in a recognition that this was all of our issue. This was all of our concern. That the challenges of race in this country are not limited to those who seem to only bear the burden, but they really hold us all down. They prevent all of us from achieving what we could and how great this country truly could be. Now, we stand here as part of a task force that was focused on analyzing the Students for Fair Admissions decision and providing guidance for groups that are going to be grappling with it. And grapple with it, we all must, we know this. But we also know that the diversity and the equity and the inclusion provisions that have become part of corporate life are part of the fabric of our society because they benefit all of our society. They lift all of us up. As Brad has noted, we are all stronger, better, wiser when we are all at the table. And so our challenge was to, of course, uphold what is the law of the land, but still provide guidance to companies, to the judiciary, to law firms, to educational institutions that recognize this important value. Again, not just for one group or two groups, but for all of us, and are determined to maintain what has been, frankly, a forward march across the generations. But like every forward march, it's not straight. And look, those of us who've worked in this field for a while know it has never been straight. There's never been a straight line to equality in this country. It has always gone forward and backward, and sometimes it seems like it comes to a stop. And for many of us who first read the decision this summer, it felt like things may in fact have come to a stop. But this report is designed to open up the world of possibilities within the challenges that we all face. Because as hard as this has always been, as difficult and challenging as it has been to move equality forward, one thing that we have never done is stopped. And we're not doing it now. So we're focused on real practical things that these organizations can do to live up to the promise of America. Because we all know that talent is everywhere, but equal opportunity still is not. And for those of us who have spent time working in this field, who will continue, as I know my colleagues here will, both at the firm and at the New York State Bar Association, this is how we truly make America great. So I want to thank all of you for coming forward to hear about our efforts, to read this report. I encourage you to read it and look at the guidance that's given. You will see there's still a breadth of options available for all parts of society to recognize the value that we all bring to the table. So with that, let me turn it over to Susan. I think, Susan, you're going to moderate the questions?
I am.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Kapil Loghani, he's the Senior Vice Chancellor for Legal Affairs and General Counsel for SUNY. He's joining us at the table because some of the questions you may have may be in the academic area, and he is also taking interviews along with President Lewis afterwards. So, and we can also arrange interviews with other members of the task force. We are not taking any questions that are off topic. We have a limited time. All questions must be on the subject that were gathered here today.
We had that rule at DHS.
That were gathered here today to speak. For your first question, if you could just say your name and your news organization, so the panelists will have it. Your question could be to the entire panel or to any member in particular. And we'll start now. Who wants to start? Patrick?
I don't need a mic, right?
Just speak loudly because we are videotaping it, which is something I should have mentioned. We are videotaping it for the benefit of TV stations and anybody else who might need it.
I usually don't have a problem being heard. I think this would probably be most appropriately directed to Mr.
Patrick is
Carr.
from ALM.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Patrick Smith. I'm with the American Lawyer. There's been at least 2 law firms that have been the target of lawsuits for their own internal diversity efforts thus far, and I would imagine that's probably not going to stop. Does that change the calculus on how you guys are going to approach other entities on how they should handle theirs? And why do you feel that the regressive groups have decided to target law firms as part of their initial folly?
Well, this issue has become very politicized, which, given the fissures in our society and our political universe, is not a surprise. The fact that law firms and other professional groups are being targeted also is not a surprise. I promise you it will not deter anyone in this room from doing what needs to be done to safeguard diversity across law firms, corporations, universities, and society more broadly. There are lots of ways, as the report catalogs, in which diversity initiatives can be preserved, can be safeguarded going forward, that are lawful. I fully anticipate, as Jay indicated, that there will be lawsuits galore in the weeks and months and years to come. That will just cause our resolve to be that much greater as we protect diversity to the very best of our ability.
Thank you.
Hi.
Beth with Bloomberg. You all talked about needing anti-bias training and data collection in the court system. I'm wondering if there's anything in the New York court system. Is there anything currently happening like that in the court system, like even at a smaller level, or like what resources are needed to even expand or start that wholly new?
And with 3 members of the New York State court system sitting in front of me, the answer is yes. No, in all seriousness, the answer is yes. One of the things that I noted in the report I issued 3 years ago about the New York State judiciary is that there are, in fact, a lot of mechanisms that exist to address diversity, bias in the court system, places for people to go who have grievances, but a lot of people in the community, in the legal community, in the courthouse community were not aware of them. And so one of my recommendations was that we promote, highlight a lot of the existing programs and practices of the state judiciary so people are aware of them, people know where to go, people can be reassured about accountability and so forth. And the judiciary does track demographics, diversity. If you look at the report I wrote 3 years ago, I noted the increasing levels of diversity among the judges. And there are various mechanisms for accountability, for bias training. There's now a video that is shown to jurors when they walk into the courthouse about implicit bias. There is now mandatory training for judges when it comes to implicit bias. And so a lot's been done and a lot more is being done, particularly in the last 3 years, under the leadership of Judge Edwina Mendelson, who's sitting right there.
Next question. No other questions? Patrick, you must have another question.
I mean, I have a lot of questions.
Go ahead. You take it over. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead, Patrick, and then we'll have MP.
Hey.
Sorry, MP.
Yeah, so I guess these are coming from, I apologize if this comes out a bit jumbled, these are coming from some of my colleagues, but I guess which DEI actions by law firms qualify as voluntary race-conscious affirmative action? Or I guess that could actually be expanded to any organization. I mean, are we having to parse out what constitutes something that is and isn't biased, and like who gets to be the arbiter of that with all these different programs?
So I think it's important to recognize. I think sometimes we conscript the concept of what DEI really is, because what it really means is expanding opportunities both for people coming into a system and for an organization to reach out to a variety of people who otherwise may not have come within its orbit. And that's actually not considered an affirmative action plan as it is often defined for some companies. And those are still permitted as well. I mean, the whole issue that the SFFA case decided was using race as the primary and deciding factor. So when it comes to expanding opportunity, there still are a number of lawful things that organizations can do to both expand the pipeline of applicants and also to expand opportunities for applicants before they come to an organization, and then within an organization to encourage retention of diverse applicants, diversity of not just ethnic background, but gender and background, et cetera. So I think people need to really view the issue as there still are so many things that can be done to make sure that the aperture through which you view everyone is as broad as possible. Many of the efforts that are undertaken are still completely lawful and are encouraged, reaching out to diverse student populations, encountering or engaging with diverse job fairs, ERG groups, mentorship programs. Many of those are still not only lawful, but they're positive, and they've been shown to have positive impact.
Go ahead, Dick.
I just wanted to add to that a little bit. The loss of affirmative action as it was
is certainly a blow to inclusion and diversity. However, it's also an opportunity for us to now really examine our various programs and look for new ways that we can expand on our diversity programs, our inclusion programs. This is a wake-up call, for heaven's sakes. It's something that our law firms, our businesses, our judiciary, and so forth can, and our schools can now say, okay, what now? And we've got imaginative people, as you can see at this right here, and right in the front row here with our judges. We have people who clearly are devoted to this issue, number one, and number two, have the brain power to say, look, we've got to do better, and we now see the landscape, so how are we going to deal with it? And I think that that's what this report is going to demonstrate. So I'm very proud of this report. I'm very proud of these people and the other contributors, and I think we should now look at this as an opportunity.
Patrick, we'll go to MP and then come back to you, or MP?
Hi. Yes, I'd just like to ask, does the report detail what a race-neutral strategy might look like? And can you briefly describe what that might be in the context of corporate programs?
What was your question in the context of business or higher ed?
In the context of business and law firms specifically, as opposed to, let's say, you're also covering educational. But I was just wondering, what would a race-neutral strategy be?
The way I'd answer that question is, could you identify yourself, please?
I said MP McQueen, Bloomberg.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
The way I would answer that is to foster a working environment where people who are different in certain respects are encouraged to get to know one another, support each other, serve as mentors to each other, to foster a more collegial environment. In the law firm context now, it is the case that our clients want to see diverse teams working on their matters. It is the case that judges will often expect to see diverse teams sitting at counsel table. And so this is not just something that is in general a good idea. It's compelling from a business perspective also. When you hire someone, you want to see that person succeed. And the way a person succeeds is through developing professional relationships, good mentorships. And so, to me, the essence of diversity, equity, and inclusion is encouraging people to work with, get to know, and mentor people who are different from themselves. That is in my judgment, race-neutral approach to fostering a more wholesome environment.
And the only thing I would add to that, MP, is in our report in the appendix, pages 91 to 94, we catalog about 15 different steps that private employers, public corporations can take that we believe would be race neutral and that would safeguard diversity. So there's a whole catalog of different steps, action items, initiatives employers, businesses can take, and summarizing it obviously is not going to do justice to the entire list. But the appendix is there to provide very clear, concrete guidance to businesses, universities, law firms, and broader societal institutions on the steps they can take if they remain committed to diversity, as we assume they do.
Patrick?
You all
If
sort of
anyone else
mentioned-
wants to jump in, that's fine.
So you want me to come up to the table?
Did anyone have, okay, Patrick, it's you.
I mean, it sounds like you all understand that this is going to be a long and protracted fight, and you're expecting that. Is there, I mean, you mentioned education as the start, but Jim, you talk about, clients wanting to see, basically mandating diversity efforts with their outside counsel, which is a good thing, but I don't see it too far of a stretch to see these sorts of efforts from the other side saying that their clients probably shouldn't be doing that, that would threaten them with lawsuits. Do you see, is that sort of progression of this likely? Are we going to see groups telling companies that they can and can't decide that they want to have
That effort has already
diversity?
begun. We're already getting cranky letters from members of Congress about our DEI programs, for example. So though the Supreme Court decision did not apply explicitly to the private sector, I think we'd all be naive to think that we're in the same environment we were before that decision. A lot of these programs will likely receive much more scrutiny. And part of what we say in our report is that it is incumbent to more clearly state your goals and objectives in any programs at diversity, equity, and inclusion, because part of the criticism of the Harvard and UNC admissions practices that they did not.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna Mona Hartakalis. I'm a reporter with the New York Times. So I want to ask about the lawsuits galore that Mr. Cart mentioned. I'm interested primarily in universities, and I'm wondering whether, to avoid lawsuits, admissions departments are going to document more extensively how they choose students to admit, or are they going to be more covert than they used to be about how they choose students to admit and do things kind of under the table or in, whispering back and forth to one another without emails or marginal notes in the admissions file? Or just curious whether, which approach is the one that you would recommend?
Well, no one is recommending, there's nothing in this report that recommends sort of a backdoor approach or a covert effort at racial diversity, a workaround. I was struck by the fact that in her dissenting opinion, Justice Sotomayor said that that race is interlocked, quote unquote, with so many other factors in our society. Race is interlocked with geography, socioeconomic status, healthcare, educational levels, and so I do believe that it is still open for higher ed to seek to achieve socioeconomic diversity, geographic diversity. In some states, for example, like Texas, the state university will seek to admit or guarantee admission to the top 10% in every high school across the state to achieve that level of diversity. And because so much of these non-racial factors are interlocked with race, that can be a way of ensuring racial diversity without intending racial diversity per se. No one is recommending that we achieve racial diversity through the back door in some covert way. The reality of our society is that if we seek to achieve diversity in other respects, racial diversity is a consequence of that. Maybe Loretta or Brad may have a comment also on that.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I do think that, again, this report does not advocate a covert measure to do something like the law forbids, because I think that would add another wrinkle to the lawsuits galore that we're going to see. I think what you're going to see, though, is a legal attempt to expand the holding in SFFA beyond education. We've already seen the lawsuit against West Point. seeking to expand it beyond the exclusion of our military academies, for example. So I think that's what you'll see. You'll see a continuation of the reverse discrimination lawsuits that frankly have been around for generations. Those will amplify. But I think that one of the lessons from the decision is that whenever there's been a legal conclusion that strict scrutiny is not revealing enough of the ways in which a particular goal is being met, that one way to deal with that is frankly to document more of what one does. And so I think what you're going to see are universities as well as other organizations in society being very clear about their goal of attaining diversity across all types of the metric, and the things that they are doing that are perfectly permissible in order to achieve that goal. And one of the ways in which I think that you'll see that intersectionality, so to speak, is in the business world. I mean, it's actually quite well documented that organizations that have greater diversity, particularly at the top, tend to do better by financial metrics, by economic metrics, by the metrics that we have deemed to be measures of success. And so I think for those of us who have always known that a well-rounded product is a better product, the focus now is on making sure that we can show that as clearly as possible.
So does this mean, though, that if I'm in the admissions office and making decisions about applicants, I would be counseled by my lawyer that it's okay to say this is a really talented black applicant, we should take a second look, or would I be told, don't mention the word black or Asian or Hispanic?
Well, what Justice Roberts said expressly is that it is acceptable to consider in an evaluation of the individual personal characteristics such as how one overcomes hardship. And hardship in this country very often includes being the victim of race discrimination. He says that explicitly. Kapil, do you want to add something?
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, I think it's really important to note that the court didn't forbid racially aware decision-making, right? What they said is you can't admit exclusively based on racial status alone. So as the Secretary just said, life experience is critical. And I think the Department of Education gave a great example in their guidance. If you were the sole black violinist in an orchestra, your race tied to that experience is relevant because it makes our campuses richer. There's nothing in this decision that says universities need to change their missions as it pertains to their commitment to diversity. And when you if you have an applicant, an underrepresented minority, who has qualities and characteristics that are going to enrich your mission in that campus environment, your race is relevant and will continue to be relevant. And I think as the Attorney General said, it's not just racial status and it's not just life experience. There are also a lot of other race-neutral considerations that we need to take into account. Geography, for example, your first-generation status, or your first-generation applicant, for example. That's relevant to the richness that you provide to any given campus. It's also really critical that we double down on our outreach and recruitment efforts and our pipeline programs, our dual enrollment programs. These are all critical parts of the puzzle that are going to lead to a diverse set of students that continue to occupy our campuses. It's particularly important for us at the State University of New York, where we have 64 campuses throughout this state. And one of the pillars of our Chancellor John King, former Secretary of Education, is diversity. And so we are doubling down on our outreach, recruitment, and pipeline efforts, our dual enrollment programs. We have tremendous programs like the Equal Educational Opportunity Program. People think it is race-based. It's not. It's socioeconomically based. It's to provide ancillary services for all our students. And it's based on economics alone. But it is a critical tool to support our diverse students. We've also asked the legislature, for example, to help us by mandating things like requiring that all high school seniors fill out the FAFSA form, right? That is something that will, we hope, lead again to more diverse students feeling that they can afford to go to college. Right? There are other things like the tuition assistance program, which helps families, students of whose families don't make more than $80,000 a year. We've asked the legislature to expand that program. So as we say in this report, this is going to take, to quote former Secretary Clinton, it's going to take a village here, right? It's going to take the donors, alums, across the board. But I want to be crystal clear. This is not about race-blind admissions. Race still matters. It's just a different language we're talking about. And we want to make sure that our applicants tie their race to their life experience. Because as the Secretary said, that is critical, and Justice Roberts explicitly said that that was appropriate.
Dick, you had a comment on this
Yeah, I
question?
just want to add a little footnote. And that is, we keep talking about how universities and admissions departments can take a look at how somebody was affected by race. And we tend to think of that as how they have survived discrimination and so forth. And clearly that's an appropriate thing to look at. But how about the young student who writes an essay and says, I'm a black student and I want to talk about what inspired me. And they want to mention President Obama or Secretary Johnson or Attorney General Lynch, and they say, I saw these people, and it's given me a reason why I really want to move on, why I really want to succeed. And that's important too. So there's the positives, the negatives, and so forth that have affected a student's life.
Does that answer your question, or you have a follow-up? Yes? If you have a
We could
follow-up,
go
go
on
ahead.
forever, but.
I know. If you have a follow-up, go ahead.
No, I mean, I get, it's okay to look at this, at race as an individual matter, Secretary Johnson said, but not to, obviously even now you're not supposed to aim for a certain target number, right? So when is it not okay to look at race?
Who wants to take that question?
When you get in trouble.
Our emphasis is on the positive. What can be done?
Did you want to respond?
I think, yeah, no, I think the Secretary said it. I think that's absolutely right. I think there are, I think the takeaway from this is we want students across our great state to know that there is a place for them, that this decision in any way, shape, or form does not preclude their attendance. There's a real obligation on us, law firms, the judiciary, higher ed institutions in particular, to make students aware of the opportunities that exist and how we can continue to support them. And there are, as we illustrate in this report, so many race-neutral manners in which to get to this end goal and to continue to ensure that our campuses are diverse havens for our students.
Kapil, I just want to make one clarification. I know you're speaking from SUNY's perspective, but we see this as a national report applying to students all over the country. And that's very important. Patrick? You can't be out of question.
Yeah, all right, yes. I do have one more question. So you'd all mentioned that there will be various iterations and updates of reports such as this sort of plays out. Do you guys have any sort of timetable on like a cadence on when you would hope to be able to do this, or is it going to be reactionary based on what happens in various lawsuits? And
Yeah, we don't have a plan at this point, but earlier today I mentioned that to Secretary Johnson that I understood he was volunteering to move forward with updates as things evolve.
I just got volunteered.
There's a lot of witnesses to it.
Yeah, and as long as I'm at it, we're going to add Brad Karp, Attorney General Lynch, to that. And you're going to have to give up another summer, Justice Chambers. But you know, this is an evolving issue, and the Bar Association will confront this as it moves forward. We're certainly going to see, I believe, a rash of of lawsuits. I think we all believe that. And as they're dealt with and as they're decided, it's going to further define the terrain. And that's what we have to look for. And at that point in time, I believe the Bar Association will confront those issues.
I also think you'll see evolving best practices develop naturally over time. And we want to make sure that those best practices can be cascaded through the relevant communities.
Yeah.
Kind of bouncing off of that question, I was wondering if there are other bar associations in other states that you guys are working with or eyeing or partnerships?
She's asking about other bar associations in other states. We have heard from some people who are awaiting our report. Would you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I have heard from a number of bar associations throughout the country who are very interested in seeing this report, which you guys are previewing right now. We have not at this point in time worked with any other bar associations in connection with this report. However, we have shared this with lots of bar associations and affinity bar associations throughout New York State, and we will be sharing it with many others after today. We were unable to do it sooner. Well, we gave preliminary reports sooner, but we couldn't give the official version until today because the executive committee acted upon this today, overwhelmingly, by the way. If the opportunity arises, we are not going to decline opportunities to work with others. This is, as Susan said, this is not just a New York problem. This is a national problem. We write from the New York perspective, but it carries over to every state and territory.
Thank you.
Beth, we do believe we're the first bar association to put together such a comprehensive report. I haven't seen anything else like this out there from anyone. You know, it's 90 pages or so. Okay. Sarah, anything? Patrick?
He's burned out.
You burned out, really? Okay.
I have to say, I've never seen anyone so solicitous of reporters asking questions.
Hey, listen, that's my background. You wait till you see this.
It's not mine.
She was on the other side of one.
And Mona, any other
I'm curious about best practices. I think that's the positive way of framing the question.
Yeah. Well, it's also,
You're interested in hearing some of the best practices?
I'm wondering.
well, I think what you're going to see is every university admissions office right now is trying to figure out how to deal with the Supreme Court's decision in a lawful manner. I believe they're going to develop different shades of solutions. I think everyone is going to be watching very closely what different universities adopt. And I think over time, you're going to see best practices emerge. We outline, I think it's in pages 89 to 91 of the appendix, 25 different strategies, potential points of guidance for universities to deal lawfully with the implications of the decision. I think universities are going to mix and match among the solutions. A lot of them will be tailored to their particular mission statement. And I think over the next 6 months or a year, you're going to look at the yields, you're going to look at the incoming classes, and you're going to see how the universities fared. Everyone is going to look at the data, look at the output, and begin to iterate their solutions. And I think and it's all going to be against the backdrop of ongoing litigation, as we know. So I think this is going to take several years to play out. At the end of the day, I do think best practices will emerge that are deemed lawful, and ultimately there'll be a code of conduct on how to deal with the new reality that universities and institutions of higher education are grappling with.
Thanks. Anyone else want to answer that? Do we have any more questions? Sure. Okay. We'll be here a while, a couple of us. If you have any questions and you want to arrange interviews, whatever. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you for our panelists.